Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot. Oh, and spoilers. Welcome to the channel, I'm Haynes. I talk movies all day, sometimes I talk about games, so subscribe right now if you want to be entertained. And today, I want to talk about Spider-Man 3, the 2007 final movie in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Now, the first Spider-Man movie was so good, many consider it to be the film that kicked off the comic book craze, even though X-Men came before. And let's not forget about Blade. And of course, there was the Batman series, Superman series, and you know what? Let's just move on. Anyway, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 are generally considered to be great films, but Spider-Man 3? Not so much. So why is that? And is it really as bad as everyone thought? Here's what I'm gonna do. Go through the movie, point out all the dumb things I can find, and then at the end, drop a few final thoughts. So the movie starts off with Peter Parker narrating that everyone used to hate him and now they love him, which is kinda ironic because this is the one movie nobody loved. But anyway, the point is things are going well for our friendly neighborhood. You know, Harry Osborn from the previous movie believes Peter Parker killed his dad and wants revenge, and has apparently spent the time between Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 preparing for that. But from the opening, it's clear that Peter, even with all his spider powers, is real easy to get got. Surely Harry has the money to have him killed by somebody who has nothing. And I know he has the Peter tinkle to sense danger, but Peter was so engrossed in the play, he didn't even realize Mary Jane was butchering her performance. I'm just saying, this movie could have been like 10 minutes max. Mary Jane says she wants to sing on stage for the rest of her life with Peter in the front row, and Peter says he'll be there. And I know it's just the type of thing you say in a moment because he's still trying to get into MJ's VJ, but he's gotta know how unrealistic that is, right? This guy's gotta hold down a job, go college, and rescue babies from burning buildings. I think he's gonna miss a few shows. Flint Marko escapes from prison, and while still in his Orange is the New Black outfit, while the police are still on 2 stars, goes straight to the place where his daughter lives. Are you dumb? Also, it was super easy for Flint to break into his daughter's bedroom. I know they're supposed to be poor, but you can still lock windows from the inside. Flint tells his daughter that he promises to make her healthy again. No matter what it takes, he'll get the money. Now I know it's just the type of thing you say in a moment because you're still hoping your ex will let you have one last conjugal visit, but he's gotta know how unrealistic that is, right? Like, mate, you're clearly not smart enough to not get caught doing crimes, and ain't no legit places hiring an escaped convict. And then this guy has the audacity to say, I'm not a bad person, I've just had bad luck. Nah, bad luck is being in the wrong place at the wrong time through no fault of your own. He didn't have to go rob people. He could have opened up a Just Giving account to raise money for his daughter's treatment. Nah, this guy's got no excuses. Aunt May tells Peter that a man has to be understanding and put his wife before himself. Peter says he can do that, and I know it's just the type of thing you say in a moment because it gets likes on Facebook, but he's gotta know how unrealistic that is, right? I mean, Mary Jane is pretty much damsel in distress throughout all 3 movies. She has next to no agency, and I know Peter really wants to shoot his web in her garden, but at some point you gotta realize you can't be a simp forever. In fact, at some point, he kinda does. Harry attacks Peter in the middle of the street and they start fighting in the air, swinging, flying, shooting. Now some of you might be thinking, how come nobody noticed them? It's New York. Honestly, that's probably the most realistic part of the film. But here's the thing, if Harry's intention was to kill Peter, then there's at least one part where he could have just let Peter fall to his death, because apparently Peter forgot he could shoot webs out of his wrists. Just saying, this movie could have been like 20 minutes, max. But Harry broke his fall just so he can tell Peter, you knew this was coming. Knew what was coming? You saving his life? Are you dumb? Why is this guy only now just telling Captain Stacy that Flint Marko escaped? And who's given orders to direct police resources to catch one dumb criminal, if not the captain? Anyway, Flint is on the run and he runs into a not so secure facility. Now, how is it that Flint can climb over a barbed wire fence and his shirt is still intact? No cuts, no tearing, no nothing. But the police, with their thick jackets on, they gotta go around? Really? Also, Flint punched a dog. The facility turned out to be a testing site where they're running experiments on sand, I guess? Somebody noticed there was a change in the silicone mass, but the other guy said it's probably a bird. Even still, don't you think you should check? Better yet, why aren't there cameras to monitor the sands they're experimenting on? And if they can tell that there's a change in the mass, how come they can't tell the bird doesn't have the same mass as a grown human? And even after they blast the sand with magic rays or whatever, how come nobody checked the sand afterwards? This has gotta be the dumbest experiment ever. Ain't nobody even taking notes. After Harry got beat up, Peter takes him to a hospital where the doctor says Harry has short-term memory loss. Peter asks if it's permanent. The doctor says, only time will tell. Really? So I guess Spider-Man 2 had Dr. Octavius, Spider-Man 3 has Dr. Obvious. Just say you don't know. Also, the doctor said that Peter could see Harry. Peter said maybe he should wait. The doctor then says, it's fine, just keep it brief because I want him to rest. Well, doctor, if you want him to rest, then just let Peter wait to see him. Okay, so I know I said I'm gonna point out all the dumb things I see, but this is gonna be said. The scene where Flint Marko becomes Sandman is brilliant. They tell a small story and convey a lot of emotion in such a short amount of time, and with no words. The whole thing is just... But that's enough of that. After Mary Jane goes to see Peter for emotional support just to realize he cares more about saving people than comforting her, the symbiote from earlier crawls onto Peter's desk. So, the symbiote has been there the whole time and didn't try to bond with Peter? Is it waiting for Peter to pay his rent? The first time we saw Gwen Stacy, she was a smart college girl. Now she's the sexy pose model. So, when did that happen? Now, I'm not saying you can't be a smart girl and a sexy model, I'm just saying, I'd like to know that story. Anyway, Spider-Man saves Gwen, but we never find out what happened to everyone else in the building. I'ma just assume they all died. This Spider-Man 3 guy don't seem like much of a hero, to be honest. Letting Eddie Brock distract him with taking photos while there are still people in a crumbling building. Bessie Brandt annoyingly buzzes at Triple J to get him to take his pill. He says thank you, but he doesn't actually take the pill, which means J. Jonah Jameson is still inside the Matrix. Mary Jane walks out the theatre after finding out she got fired. She's understandably upset, but when she goes outside and sees people clapping, she thinks it's for her. Why? This isn't after a show, it was a rehearsal that evidently she wasn't even invited to, and they're not even looking in her direction. Are you dumb? Flint Marko is walking through New York City and tips his head to pour sand out of his ear. We've already established that his whole body is sand, so this makes no sense at all. Plus at this point, he's been Sandman for at least 20 minutes, surely he'd be used to it by now. Anyway, Flint runs away from the cops and there conveniently happens to be a sand truck right across the street for him to hide in. And apparently, Marcus Alvarez was a New York cop before joining an LA biker gang. Now I'm not saying you can't be a cop and a criminal, because clearly we all know that's not true. I'm just saying, I'd like to know that story. Why would the cops be thinking he could be hiding in the sand truck when the cover was still tied down? I mean, sure, we know he's Sandman, but they don't. And when they remove the cover, the sand is still smooth, no footprints or anything. So why are they still checking? To be fair, they live in a world where a boy can stick to walls and ejaculate out of his wrists, so I guess it's not that far-fetched. Would have been nice if they said that though. But now we know Sandman can shapeshift. Why was he, and why does he continue to walk around looking like Flint Marko? And in the same outfit he was wearing when he got chased by the police? Are you dumb? Anyway, Spider-Man swings in to get the keys for the city and a whole crowd, well, most of the crowd, are shouting at Gwen Stacy to kiss him. Bearing in mind that this is New York, y'all can't really be surprised about Governor Cuomo. Mary Jane was upset about Peter kissing Gwen. Understandable, right? But she says that was our kiss. I guess she forgot about this already. Now granted, that wasn't in front of the world, and she wasn't with Peter at the time. However, the complaint was that it was our kiss, not a kiss. Furthermore, Mary Jane asks if it was Peter or Spider-Man that was kissing Gwen, which means she mentally separates the two. But then, there is no our kiss, because it was Mary Jane and Spider-Man, not Mary Jane and Peter Parker, unless Mary Jane is only with Peter because he's Spider-Man and cares little to nothing for the boy under the mask. Hold up, was this movie written by an incel? So why are the police only now telling Aunt May and Peter Parker that Flint Marko killed Uncle Ben? It's been 2 movies at this point, why even bother tell them at all? Furthermore, why did the police call Peter? Wouldn't Aunt May be the person they really need to talk to about her husband's killer? Nearly halfway through the movie and the symbiote finally bonds with Peter. I guess it figured Peter ain't never gonna pay his rent, so it's now or never. Or are we supposed to believe that this is the first time Peter slept in his bed since the movie started? Or did the writers just suddenly remember Venom is supposed to be in this movie too? Also, did the symbiote bond with Peter, or did it bond with the Spider-Man suit? Because he says he feels wow, suggesting it bonded with him, but then he takes his mask off like a regular mask, suggesting it just bonded with the suit. And in that case, why would Peter feel anything? Or is the wow feeling referring to how the symbiote makes a fabric feel softer? Also, Peter wasn't wearing his mask when the symbiote bonded, so Dr. Connor tells Peter that the symbiote needs to bond to a host to survive, yet it managed to go half the film just chilling in Peter's apartment.
So that was a fucking lie.
But we do get a clear answer to the bonding question. Since Peter visited Dr. Connor as Peter, and when he went home, he had the Venom suit in a suitcase. In fact, he had 2 Spider-Man suits, the Venom suit in the suitcase and one regular one hanging in the cupboard. So, this means the symbiote most definitely bonded with the suit and not Peter. After Venom Spider-Man breaks Eddie's camera, Eddie takes out a second camera to take photos with, but he takes pictures without looking where he's going, and especially considering Venom Spider-Man just opened up a manhole cover, are you dumb? Anyway, Peter's landlord is still asking for the rent Peter owes from Spider-Man 2. How does Peter still have an apartment? This movie should have been called Spider-Man. No way he still has a home. Dude should be back at his aunt's house by now, but Mr. Dickovich been giving him bare chances, and even after Peter shouts at him, Mr. Dickovich gives him another chance. Nah, where's that same energy? You need to get your money or get someone else. Mr. Dickovich's advice about how to talk to women hasn't been relevant since the Stone Age, but, I mean, he's not exactly wrong. Just saying. Harry asks Bernard to get some food because they have a guest coming over, and by all accounts it seems like Bernard does go get some food. But I guess the lesson here is to be more specific, like maybe next time ask for foods you don't have to cook yourself. So remember earlier how Mary Jane couldn't open Peter's door? Yet Ursula, the daughter of the landlord whose thin figure is a direct result of Peter not paying his rent, can? Okay. Also, Ursula seems creepily obsessed with Peter's love life. After Harry remembers who the F he is, he makes Mary Jane break up with Peter. But the movie never explores how Mary Jane feels knowing that she gave that kind of performance on stage. She may still have an acting career. In fact, if she still had an acting career, her and Peter might still be in a good place, which means she never would have called Harry, went to his house, wasted his food and kissed him, and then Harry wouldn't have gotten all confused and suddenly remembered that Peter killed his dad and then never would have forced her to break up with Peter. You know, a lot of bad stuff in this movie could have been avoided if Mary Jane was a better actress. Or is Peter's weakness being so infatuated with Mary Jane to the point where he can't tell that she lies for a living and isn't even that good at it? Because if so, then that's another missed opportunity from Harry. Just saying, this movie could have been like an hour 25 max. The Daily Bugle publishes an article calling Spider-Man a thief. This guy says his 9-year-old daughter loves Spider-Man and asks, who's she supposed to look up to now? You, nigga! So a lot of people made fun of emo Peter dancing. I don't know, I kinda like it to be honest. Peter is eating Ursula's cookie in the hallway, but what I really want to know is, has he paid his rent yet? Because if not, the cookie should not be free. So Peter can play piano? Okay, since when? Has he always played but just not on camera? Or is this the power of the emo here? In any case, Peter was super disrespectful to Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy and Hot Legs in this scene, which I guess was the point because he's not a simp anymore, now he's an alpha male, and alpha males can be disrespectful to women and not face any real repercussions. Some women even like it when you talk like that. Yeah, this movie was definitely written by an incel. But if the symbiote only bonded with the suit, then Peter's behavior change is all him. But if the symbiote only bonded with the suit, then how come all of a sudden Peter needs church bells to take it off? Literally been putting it on and taking it off with no problems all this time. So did the symbiote bond with Peter or did it bond with the suit? Can we get an answer to that, please? Aunt May visits Peter and immediately cusses out his apartment. I mean, sure, it's a crappy spot, but he's a part-time photographer and student in New York. He ain't gonna have that much money. I know dude's probably paying like $4,000 a month just for that place. How did Eddie know Mary Jane was gonna get a cab and which cab she was gonna get? And considering what New York waitresses get paid, can she afford a cab? Also, how does Eddie even know who Mary Jane is? I would have to assume it's because the symbiote and Peter shared memories or something like that, but can you explain that, please? After nearly killing Harry, Peter comes back to ask him for help, didn't even apologize first. Or at all. Harry says no, then Bernard tells him that he's seen things in his house and how Harry's dad died by his own blade, and so you knew that all this time and you said nothing? This guy literally let 2 former best friends nearly kill each other multiple times and didn't think maybe that's pertinent information that Harry should know. I hope Bernard got fired after this. Anyway, Mary Jane is in danger again and Spider-Man comes to save her. again. In this scene, Spider-Man has his mask off for a good portion of it, and I know they're high above the ground, but since we've already established that telephoto lenses exist in this world, then it seems to me somebody on the ground knows Spider-Man's face. Actually, to be fair, a lot of people on the train know Spider-Man's face too, but they promise not to tell anyone. Eddie jumps back into the symbiote while Peter's throwing a grenade at it, and I guess Eddie dies, but what exactly happened to the body? And how come the bomb made a whole Eddie disappear, but only partially burned Harry's face? Flint Marko decides to have a heart-to-heart with Peter and tells him about the nights his uncle died. Now Peter forgives him, but all I heard from Flint was a whole bunch of excuses and no accountability. Harry dies, which is sad, but at least now we know for sure that Bernard is out of a job. And with 2 former bosses dead by stabbing, ain't nobody gonna employ his withholding information ass. Why were the Stacys at Harry's funeral? Are we supposed to assume that they knew him because they're all in the same city? Dude, it's New York. People don't even know their next door neighbors. The movie ends with Peter going to see Mary Jane at her job, and it implies that all is forgiven. But Peter never actually apologized. And how is Mary Jane hired to be a singer waitress, but barely does any singing? I hope they fired her after this. Alright, now before I get into my final thoughts, if you liked this movie, check out these movies. They're all also based on comic book characters, they're all also the third in their respective series, and they're all also considered the worst in their respective series. But even still, I actually really did like all of those films. Well, apart from Blaze Trinity, because that really was bad. Like, the less said about that film, the better. So one of the biggest complaints people had about Spider-Man 3 is that it had too many villains, and I'd agree and disagree with that. I don't think the problem was specifically the number of villains, but more so it had more villains than it knew what to do with. Of the 3 villains in the movie, only one dies as a villain, and it's the one that was barely in the movie and as such had the least connection with the audience, making Venom's death next to meaningless. And with Sandman, you really don't get much with him either. He robs people because his daughter needs treatment that he couldn't afford. Okay, clearly that plan didn't work, so why did he escape prison just to do the same thing that he got caught doing before? Make it make sense. And how exactly did Marko even manage to escape prison? Because honestly, he don't seem that smart. And then Harry, who's had the most development over the 3 movies, even he felt like they didn't really know what to do in the end. So yeah, his butler just happened to be keeping secrets. And it's not just the villains that have issues. Mary Jane? Ugh. At this point, she needs to sign up for a karate class or something. I mean, look, I know you're not supposed to victim blame, but if everywhere you go stinks, maybe you need to take a bath. And let's keep it real, Peter only likes her because she's pretty. In fact, why is no one talking about the fact that Peter was apparently in love with this girl from when they were kids? A girl who lived next door to him, went to the same school, and still barely noticed he existed. This is what you call an unhealthy obsession. Not that any kind of obsession is ever healthy, but if Peter Parker is not the king of simps, then oh my days. But let's talk about Peter Parker, because this is perhaps where the message of the movie lies. In Spider-Man, Peter was full-on nerdy nice guy pining after Mary Jane. By the end of it and going into Spider-Man 2, he realizes he can't be with Mary Jane and keep her safe, so he suppresses his feelings and acts like he didn't just spend the whole last movie jerking off to her memory. But in Spider-Man 3, everything is going well. The nerdy nice guy, the guy who used to get picked on, used to get ignored, finally gets the girl of his dreams. Everybody loves Spider-Man, and he's even keeping up with his schoolwork, but still hasn't paid his rent, so maybe not everything is going well. But the point is, he's in a good place in life, probably for the first time in his life. And what happened? Peter became a little bit arrogant, a little bit self-centered, and more than a little bit inconsiderate. And that's not even emo Peter, that was regular Peter. Now, Dr. Connors said that the symbiote amplifies characteristics of its host, especially aggression, not only aggression. The symbiote just made Peter more of what he already was. Over the 3 movies, Peter goes from everybody hates Chris to everybody loves Raymond, and that social shift presents Peter with a position of power, and power corrupts. The overarching theme of Spider-Man has always been, with great power comes great responsibility. The 3 movies represent Peter in the various ways he's handled that responsibility. Sometimes he handles it well, other times, not so well. And from the beginning of Spider-Man 3, he's not handling it well. He's already let his newfound status go to his head. He's allowed himself to believe everybody loves him. But it's not Peter everybody loves. In fact, it's not really even Spider-Man everybody loves. It's what Spider-Man does everybody loves. And when Spider-Man ain't doing that no more, or at least when people believe he isn't, their love goes with it. Perhaps what they were trying to do with this film is show that we need to remember why we do what we do. To not get distracted by the superficial or let our egos take us away from the things that are really important. Flint Marco needed money for his daughter but got caught up in trying to do things quick instead of doing things right, and ended up making a series of bad decisions that landed him in prison. Eddie Brock wanted to kiss J. Jonah Jameson's ass for a living, but also took shortcuts, and instead of owning his mistakes when found out, he let his ego tell him that it's all Peter's fault. And Harry, so blinded by his rage for Spider-Man about the death of his father, he doesn't face the truth. The truth being that his father didn't love him, or at least not in the way that he wanted to be loved. Obsession, pride, blame, lack of introspection. Some of the things that could happen when we lose ourselves. But that's what I think of Spider-Man 3. What do you think of Spider-Man 3? Let me know down below, and while you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a suggestion if you don't mind.